Alice, thanks so much for joining us today on the Sporting Transition podcast. Really grateful for your time to share some of the insights you have as you've transitioned from a kind of elite rowing career into a sales career. Before we get kicked off, we'd love for you just to give us a quick introduction about who you are, what your sport was, what you're doing now, and then we'll jump off the back of that, and I'm sure that will lead us into a pretty good conversation for the next half an hour.
Yeah, no, thanks, Mark, and thank you for sort of inviting me on. I guess I was a rower for I started in uni, so a bit later to it than everyone else, and it was my second year of uni. I did it seriously, or like post university for 4 or 5 years, and then sort of through injury more than anything, ended up sort of coming to a pause, which ended up being like a permanent pause in it would have been April 2023, so still relatively recently. And currently I'm a SDR at Definey, which is a legal tech company. But prior to that, I did a stint in recruitment as well. So yeah, that's where I am at the moment.
Cool. That's a good headline to kind of get started with. You talk about starting a little bit later. I mean, some would argue that really late to start a sporting career in second year of uni. So yeah, just talk us through that a little bit. I mean, did you have a sporting background before going to uni, which kind of then transitioned into rowing, or were you just a non-sports person, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh my goodness, I've got a gift here, and it just emerged in your second year in uni. You became that person who ends up on the World Class program for GB rowing.
So I guess school, I was always into sport, but never took it very seriously. So I did a bit of like cross country running, but it was never outside of school. Netball. I enjoyed all the sports, but it was basically condensed into PE lessons, and that was about it. And then in sixth form, I went to like a big sixth form college, so it was like 3,000 people across the 2 years. And I was in the gym one morning, and one of the sort of PE teachers saw me. I'm tall, and he was like, "Oh, have you ever considered rowing?" And I was like, "Oh no, I didn't really know what it was." And from Essex, don't think there's any rowing clubs there. But he was like, "When you go to university, you should have a look at it." So I got to uni, and I was sort of in the back of my mind, but didn't do anything about it in my first year. To be honest, I was like having fun, and then I was like, "Yeah, this is great." I got to the end of my first. I was studying music. So it's like too much demands on your time, both from like a academic perspective. You don't have much sort of contact time. Yes, so I was like, I could do with some structure, and I always like sports, so I'll and give rowing a try. And yeah, just really enjoyed it. Initially it was never something I was looking to take seriously. I was just enjoyed it, and I went to Bristol. There was a really great group of people there, like just such a welcoming group. I'm still friends with a lot of them, and I was just like, oh, this is fun, and it kind of went from there. So yeah, not a massive sporting background, but quite quickly became quite obsessive over it.
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know what the kind of tryout policy is, but I mean, do they do, especially as you get into the kind of elite programs at GB, they do a lot of VO2 testing and kind of lactate threshold testing and stuff like that to understand whether you've almost got like an advantage over athletes, over genetically or whatever you want to call it. But, it is quite impressive to start so late and make it onto the kind of, funded programs.
Yeah, and I guess that's with rowing. I guess that's what also drew me to rowing. Is most universities have like a novice program. So your first year of rowing, you're a novice, and everyone is new to rowing. And it's like one of the few sports, I guess, you could probably be training multiple times a week, taking relatively seriously, but being a complete beginner at. And then once you've done that year, you sort of go into like the senior program, and then you've got possibility of trialing for GB for under 23s. That's what I chose to do, like the pathway I chose to follow. So you do a few more training sessions, and basically anyone can rock up to GB trials in November. In terms of VO2 max testing and things like that, initially you don't have so much of that, but they do take your height and your wingspan because yeah, being tall in rowing is helpful. And then once you're on a radar, they might do a little bit of testing and things like that. But yeah, I think in terms of like going onto their radar, anyone can turn to
Mm.
GB trials, do an erg test, and if you've sort of hit a benchmark of what might be of sort of interest to the coaches, they'll keep an eye on you, I guess.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I mean, you've taken a path, I guess, where you've been at university. You've even gone to university without rowing being on the radar. So did you already in your head have some ideas about career and what you want to be doing, or were you not really sure, like probably most students who end up going to university in the first place?
Loosely, like very loosely, and I guess like maybe trying to be like a professional, like aiming for being like a professional sports person or like a funded sports person. Is maybe a dream, I guess. Equally, I thought that I might want to be like a film composer. Again, like not very realistic, but like something I really liked. So like, yeah, I studied music and was like, oh yeah, I think this is what I'd like to do. But again, I think maybe you pursue out of passion more than like out of like I don't know, realism. They take over. So as I started becoming more and more involved in rowing and went through that trials process, so I was like trialing for the under-23 team whilst I was at university. That started taking more and more of my spare time and my bandwidth, I guess. And the composer sort of idea I had sort of got pushed to the side. Both of them, you probably have to invest a lot of your time and passion,
Yeah.
energy into to be successful, I guess. So, yeah, that was as far as I got. A bit pipe dream, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, no
But,
realism there.
but did you ever feel that once you became really serious about rowing, that you were starting to maybe divert your attention away from other things that potentially would have made your career choices more obvious once you finished university?
Yeah, completely. And I think that maybe looking back, I should have thought a bit more about the balance. Became quite focused on the rowing. That's what I wanted to do. So I went to under 23s my last year of sort of studying, and then from there I carried on rowing on more of a serious basis, and I nannied alongside that for a while whilst I looked for funding. So I sort of pursued rowing. I was like, oh, this is what I want to do. And again, I think that came a little bit from starting later. I was like, oh, I'm still very much on like a upward trajectory, which is exciting. You're like, oh, I would like to see what I can do here. So I like decided to pursue that, and yeah, did what I needed to, outside of that to facilitate that, I guess, rather than thinking, oh, what will I be doing when I'm like 30?
Mm.
I don't know. Yeah.
Like, I guess when it all happens so quickly, there's no reason to really doubt how good you can get at rowing when you start kind of midway through university, you progress so quickly. It feels almost the right thing to do to want to double down and really commit to it and then see what you can achieve, in the next 3 to 4 years. So maybe that would be a bit different if you've been rowing since 13 and you're kind of still struggling to get into the elite programs, then thinking more about the career might have been more balancing to do.
Exactly. And I guess also with sport, there's like a time pressure on, like you sort of have to, you're on the train, you sort of need to stay on the train. But yeah, I think in hindsight, definitely should have, if I were to do it again, I would have put a bit more time into thinking this will come to an end, like at some point, whether it's like in 2 months' time or whether it's in 8 years' time. Some point this will stop. What do I do then? And yeah, just put a little bit more thought in. But things have worked out. But yeah, if I had gone back, I would have maybe put a bit more energy into those thoughts.
What was your kind of transition out of rowing then? Because we've spoken briefly about your injury, which kind of precipitated, I guess, the end to your rowing career. Was that the kind of main factor? Or was there anything else on the scene that made you realize, okay, maybe this is the right time to look beyond rowing?
Yeah, so I guess again, I was relatively fresh into like the GB setup. So I'd done under 23s, and that was in 2018, and then done a few sort of World Cups, intermittent years, and then when I went into sort of around COVID time, I was training full time. I went into the Caversham Centre, which is the National Training Centre, in September 2021. And yeah, was again having a really good time. I always really enjoyed rowing and loved the racing side of it as well. So I started in the Caversham setup September 2021, and then I think it would have been April 2022. So really not long, not even a year of sort of being fully in the system. I got a ribbon stress injury, which is very common for rowers. So I got my first one. I was like, oh, we'll deal with this, recover. And then I just kept getting them. So from April 2022 through to December 2022, so not ages, but like solid 8 months, I was just kept getting rib injuries. You were like, oh, we're like between me and like the medical team, we're like, oh, what's going on here? So many blood tests, like trying to work out like why does this keep happening? And then I think from the January and February's time, I just in honesty wasn't very happy. I need a break. Your injuries are difficult, especially when that's all you're doing. You see everyone go up and do races, they're doing really well, which obviously you're very happy for them. You're also like, oh, that I'd have loved to have been a part of that, whether or not that's me like just training alongside or like being in the boat. That's a challenge. So yeah, around February time, I was like, oh, I need a break from this because, yeah, what's the best way of phrasing it? Yeah, I couldn't keep on what I was doing. Maybe my body needed a break and my mind needed a break a little bit. I sort of confirmed a decision to have and at the time it was a break in April. Got a job, and just went about life for a little bit. And then I was actually finding that I was enjoying things. Like I was enjoying spending time with friends who I hadn't managed to spend some time with, enjoying doing other sports as well, and having a bit more freedom in my spare time. So break almost just extended to be a stop, I guess. And probably only in the last few months I've sort of settled in that decision, I guess. So yeah, it was a mixture of injury and then just feeling a little bit unhappy. I think it's something that's maybe not always talked about. Was the honest. It wasn't a career-ending injury. Basically, I could have carried on. I was sort of banging my head against a wall a little bit, so I needed a bit of time off. And yeah, went into recruitment, did that for 8 or so months, I think. And then this opportunity came up at Definey, which is where I am now, which is like a legal tech company. Moved here, and yeah, I've just been enjoying life, really. Enjoying like having a bit more flexibility and agency over what you're doing.
Yeah. And what was in the last few months that have kind of made you a bit more comfortable with that decision to leave rowing? You mentioned it a few moments ago that it's in the last few months you've really felt comfortable with the decision to step away from rowing. I'm just curious to know what's kind of been happening. Is it work that's really fulfilling you, like you just mentioned? It's giving you a bit more agency. So are these all things starting to contribute to the overall satisfaction? But yeah, that was the right decision.
Yeah, I think so. Like I'm happy at work, which is helpful. There's like, I think with sales, you've got like targets and things like that. And there are a lot of mirrors between like sort of sport and a sales role, in terms of you're looking to hit a target and you're not you can't like, it's a process to get an outcome, I guess. And that's what you're trying to look for. I guess I moved to London as well, which sort of has been good. And then I think the build to the Olympics was a struggle for me because I was seeing all my like old teammates and friends, and you're like, oh, that's really cool. Like, it's really cool. And I was very like, but there's always like, oh, I'd have been loved to be more of a part of it, I guess. But then once I saw them racing, and they all did really well. So I think like the 8 and the 4 quad all got medals, and the lightweight double, like, and the double. How on, yeah, 5 boats got medals. They all did really well. And I saw it and I was like, I'm like really, really happy for everyone. And once it was over, I was like, oh, I can sort of like, I don't know, it was like a contentness with it. I'm like, I could have almost put it, I don't know whether I'm phrasing it very well. But I think that's been part of it as well. Is that thing that I was working towards has happened, and actually, how I felt about it is like overall positive and just happy for people. So yeah, I think that's part of it as well.
I mean, we spoke a little bit about you and a friend entering Henley on a more kind of casual basis. That also leads to the question of, is there ever an appetite to go back into rowing? Off the back of everything you've just said, it sounds like you're in a good place, finishing your rowing career. But is there, because a lot of people I speak to are probably on the other side of the spectrum, where it's probably a little bit too late to even think about coming back to rowing or their respective sports. Whereas for you, you're still young enough to be able to give it your all for another cycle, potentially to get you to that dream that you maybe once dreamed about. But based on everything you've just said, actually, you're pretty happy, and there isn't that pull. But yeah, just worried. I just wonder when you are at Henley, is there something when you're in that, or even in a more relaxed way, does it start kind of nibbling away a little bit of the dream?
Oh, for sure.
What you've said.
For sure. And I think like what you said there in terms of like maybe being young enough to do the next cycle. Yeah, I think if I decided to commit right now and try to do the next cycle, that's an opportunity. The following cycle, definitely not. I would sort of be too old then. And I thought about it and I'm like, oh, should I? And like it has the question has been there. And then I think about the reality of it, of like especially for this year, I'd have to work for sure alongside training to get my fitness up. And I'm like, oh, to be honest, I'm fairly happy right now. But like what you said there in terms of my friend Jessa going to attempt qualify a pair for Henley, which is a little project, but yeah, very casual. But yeah, 100% when I go to a race, just be definitely it should still be. And like even to go and do a park run, I'm like, "Ugh," like take it way too seriously. And there's always like that part of me. And I guess that's like across all the sports I dip my toe into some triathlon stuff. And like there's a little bit of a crossover with like rowers going into cycle or triathlons and doing pretty well. And I'm like, oh, should I get that? And then I get to the reality. I'm like, oh, to be honest, probably not good enough. And secondly, I don't know if I want to commit that level of training. But when I then go and like get on a start line, I'm like trying to punch way above my weight, basically.
Yeah. A true competitor. What? So you obviously chose to go into recruitment a little bit when you finished rowing. And what was your? I mean, did you explore other career paths, or did you always feel like sales feels logical, competitive, or very driven, of a discipline? You know the process of rowing, and you feel that's quite transferable in the sales discipline. So did you look around at other career paths, or did you always feel like sales is definitely one that will work for me, certainly for the short term?
Yeah, I think that I did sort of have an explore, and it's I think to be honest, like working out career stuff is difficult anyway, and it's I think probably like people who are just graduating from uni or maybe leaving, it's quite overwhelming. Like, oh, what do I do next? And I think it's probably additionally overwhelming when you spend I don't know X number of years as an athlete, and you've almost had like one career already, and then you're sort of starting again. You're a bit behind your other peers. You're like, well, what do I do next? Yeah, I thought about a few bits about accountancy, but everyone's like, oh, it's boring. But I don't know whether that's a fair. It's a stereotype, isn't it? But I think that what drew me to sort of a sales based role is that, yeah, like you said, it's like super transferable, and often in work, a new thing comes up, and I'm like, I understand why this like athletes to sales roles is such a transferable skill. And that's quite nice because you're like, oh, what I was learning for however many years as an athlete is actually useful in my job right now in terms of how to, I don't know, approach targets, how to deal with things when they sort of come out of your control, thinking about how to do a process to increase the chances of what you want happening, but you don't know whether that's going to be fruitful or not. And yeah, that was useful to me. And also, I think partly what I've been good at is like you have to be fairly, I guess, disciplined and resilient, I guess, which again, like being an athlete, you've got like that drilled into your abundance. So that's like super helpful.
Yeah. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
silly question, but you talked a bit about transferable skills from rowing into sales. Were you aware of how to brand those and position those on your CV and or in interviews as you approach companies for jobs? Because you are right, in some ways, you didn't go the full length of your rowing career. So let's say you finish uni, then carried on going for 3 to 5 years. So you could argue you're maybe 2 to 4 years behind somebody who went straight into work. So where you've got to try and, uh, find something to describe the substitute of those 2 to 4 years. So in your case, it's, elite rowing. But did you feel comfortable when coming into the job market that, okay, yeah, I'm a little bit behind because I carried on with rowing. I've not been working instead. But actually, these are the awesome things I know are extremely valuable to a company and feel very confident that, if I articulate them correctly, I will more than make up for the 2 to 4 years that I didn't get in the job market.
Yeah, I think when I first stopped, I guess for me as well, when I stopped, it was premature. It like sort of caught me unaware. So I wasn't, maybe if you're coming towards the end of an Olympic cycle, you might be starting to, whereas for me, I fully believe that I'd be continuing rowing for at least another 2 years, potentially 6 years. I definitely was going to be carrying on for like 2 years, and it sort of caught me like off guard. So I hadn't done too much thinking, but in short, initially, no, like in terms of branding the skills I'd gained through sport into like the vocab that makes sense to like jobs more generally. My friend was really useful. Hattie, she was super helpful with reading through my CV, and she'd gone to Tokyo Olympics and then she'd done like a 6-month program, like sort of athlete transition program. So had like some gauge of sport, and she was super helpful. And then I think you spoke, or I think you've spoken with Angus, right? And yeah, and I think that he must do a lot of work behind the scenes of like selling the skills that athletes do have to companies. So that's also really helpful, being like having that side of someone who knows both sides and can communicate across both of them. Because yeah, unless you've done the job, you don't fully understand what the skills are that are needed. It's about like sort of translating those skills of, and also additionally, I think when you're an athlete, some of the stuff becomes so second nature to you, and like everyone around you is doing it as well, that you don't realize actually what that skill or trait is, because it's just become so normal. So it's like actually going back and thinking like, oh, well, all these things that I take for granted actually are useful as well, but I just don't think about them in that sort of way.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It's such a key one though, isn't it? To really be able to dig deep into what you know about yourself that you have learned and how to actually articulate that. And in your example, Angus has been super helpful to try and achieve that and then help you in that process.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
I think additionally with Angus as well, it's working out what companies can offer you as well. You can be really blind with like, oh, well, probably like big companies, right? Like because everyone's just aware of X, Y, and Z. In terms of like, there's so many different roles, and like I work for I think we're technically a scale up, a startup, but no way would have I been aware of them. And also that like process of being like, oh, is this a nice culture to be working in? Will this get the best out of me, and all of that sort of thing. I think Angus does a good job of checking that those places that he's placing people into actually are an environment where you'll be happy and you'll be able to like develop, and culturally or be like something that works. I think that's like an additional aspect that also can be a little bit daunting when you're going into work for the first time, because you don't have
Yeah.
anything to compare it to necessarily.
I mean, it kind of leads into my next question, which is, you're working with quite a few elites or ex-elite athletes at the moment. How useful is that for you in terms of transitioning out of rowing and landing in a place where you had other people potentially in a similar-ish type situation, maybe for different reasons, that ultimately they've ended up working as SDRs in the same team as you? Has that made things a little bit easier? Do you feel like you've been able to share a bit more, either some of your experiences or maybe even some of the challenges you face having come out of elite sport? And has that made life a little bit easier?
Yeah, definitely. Like, you've got a common ground and experiences that, yeah, okay, each one is slightly different, but you have things you understand that your colleagues also understand. And also, I guess transitioning out of sport is like a really lengthy process, to be honest, especially if you're doing it full time. And that's been your number one focus. And it has to be like your complete like priority above. And maybe that's where I sort of went slightly wrong. So I take back what I just said. Don't think it has to, but it does become very much like a part of you, identity, and like your sort of primary priority in most aspects. So coming away from that takes quite a long time. And I'm, like I said at the start, I'm starting to sort of settle into like not being an athlete anymore. But that's near on 2 years. And Jo, who is also in the London office, so she was a pentathlete and went to, modern pep, oh, I can't remember which one. It's the one with fencing, and is it heptathlon or modern pentathlon? And she went to the Olympics in Tokyo. And I think she would have retired a similar time to me, but we didn't cross paths until like maybe like 8 months when we started to finally.
Yeah.
And I think knowing that she's also still in the transition phase is helpful, and you're sort of like encountering things that are different. Transition, you've got your career side, but you've also got like everything else. How much sport do you do? What do you eat? Like so many other aspects that are all sort of like settling back down, which can be challenging. So yeah, it's been super helpful to be around people who are experiencing similar things and also like understand past experiences as well, like the pros and cons of elite sport.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny actually when you put it that way, you maybe don't think about it so much actually, but you're right. You're at the absolute pinnacle of everything, whether it's nutrition, conditioning, obviously what you do in the weights room and in the boats themselves. And all of a sudden you've got to kind of substitute that in some capacity, because I'm assuming you can't be quite as attentive as you were to your diet, as you were as a full-time athlete, post being a full-time athlete. So all of a sudden you've got all these readjustments to make as to
Completely.
do I want to eat that? Can I eat that? Should I eat that? What should be my new diet? And in a way, maybe that is a big challenge to kind of overcome that and kind of get almost a scientific opening a new realm of reality for you, which is like us and the immortals.
It's like you've spent however long like making sure that everything is as good as it can be to help you fulfill a specific goal, I guess. And I did a half Ironman. It was being 15th of September, so not too long. Training towards it was lax. And like the food I ate the night before was like a total disaster. And then I had like people normally when you're doing that sort of thing might have like a nutrition plan, good night's sleep, all the rest of it. I remember like rocking up and I was like, honestly, all of this is like not priming me at all to do the best I can do. But I was like, I don't need to do that anymore. So it's all of those like recalibrations that like go on, and learning a new way of sort of going about life. I think when I first stopped rowing, I was like, luckily, like, I'm very grateful to. I was seeing a therapist at the time, and I was like, oh, what's my purpose? She was like, I think she said like, you've got purpose in like so many other things, like you're a sister, you're a friend, you're blah 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 blah. Because up until then, you're, and maybe this is also where I went wrong. My purpose had been like being as fast as I could be at rowing. And yeah, you've got all the, your nutrition, your sleep, everything is like geared up towards, and suddenly like that's not the purpose behind eating anymore. You're just like eating because you have to. So yeah, it's all those sorts of adjustments.
You've been an ambassador for the British Elite Athletes Association. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
To tell us a little bit about it, because I'm guessing it kind of there's some overlap with everything you just kind of described with a lot of athletes who are still in their sport, but also those coming out of their sport. Tell us about the association and what they do and what it is you do in your remit for them as an ambassador.
Yeah, so it's like an advisory committee, I guess. So it's just like a handful of athletes across the sports who meet up. It's ad hoc basically, but maybe once every few months to discuss certain points that can be quite impactful for athletes. And overall, it's painting the picture of being a full-time elite athlete is like to the people who are making the decisions around whether it's, I don't know, funding, or we talk about athlete transitions. Like, how is it best athletes can be supported by like the different bodies, and like educating is the wrong word, like giving the athlete perspective, because and this is where being an athlete, especially a full-time athlete, not many people have done it. So the challenges that are specific to being an elite athlete are only experienced by like quite a small percentage of the population, and they are unique. So I guess that's what we do. We just like discuss certain pointers to help, those bodies that are there to support athletes do that in the best capacity possible. And that's also been interesting because there's like nuances between the different sports as well. Like day to day as a rower is different to like a hockey player compared to like someone in snow sports. Like it's all there's so much like difference and variation between the sports as well. So that's like been interesting to talk about.
Yeah. And just casting your brain back, I mean, you mentioned earlier that you're always quite sporty at school. You obviously then went into the elite rowing program. So you obviously love sport and you love what it brings to you. Have you ever thought about the career in sport? So whilst you're rowing GB, did it ever occur to you that, okay, that there might be something here that isn't me being elite, but I can certainly get involved either with governing bodies or with coaching, or even beyond that, anything to do with sport, whether it's even PE teacher potentially, or anything of that capacity where you can kind of still be involved in something you love and hopefully directly inspire a future generation of athletes.
Yeah, I see myself as always somehow being involved in sport. And I think for me, it gave me like a huge amount. Like, it's most of my friends are from sport, not all, but most. And it gave me a lot. I've really enjoyed being part of a team, working towards something and just getting better at things. And there's a good number of coaches who I feel like really impacted me, not just through rowing, but just like life-wise as well, which has been helpful. And I do have that pull of wanting to be involved in that community in some capacity, but I'm still working out exactly what that is. I've done coaching in the past, and I'm considering whether to look for maybe a part-time coaching role, just because, again, that was fulfilling. Like for a period whilst I was rowing pretty much full-time, I was also doing some coaching just to help subsidize myself, and that was rewarding in itself. Like you can help other people reach their potential, and that doesn't necessarily mean like up here, like one person might want to like 3 days a week or like 3 sessions a week to rowing. Okay, what can we do with that? And how will how will you get maximum fulfillment? Maybe fulfillment is a better word than potential. To me, maybe it's like, how can you get as much fulfillment from running as possible? So yeah, in short, I'd love to be involved in sports in some capacity, but I almost need to take like a little bit of time just so I'm not involved with you at all. Like, just to like find myself, I guess, and then find myself uh, before going back and being involved in some capacity. But yeah, it's given me so much, and I think it's really helpful for other people as well. So yeah, in some way, not sure what.
And final question, and this is a quite difficult question to answer. You'd have to cast your brain back to when you were at university as well. Is thinking about careers whilst worrying a distraction?
No, I think I thought it was, but I think the advice is the wrong word. The strong thing I would have said to myself, going back to maybe like, how old was I when I started rowing? 19. Probably started getting a bit like, it's the wrong word, that sort of vibe, maybe around like 21. I think if I'd given myself a bit of advice there, it would have been to like take stock of the wider world and think where you might like to be within it beyond sport, and explore other avenues, because yeah, it will come to an end at some point, and sometimes that can be like quite, when it's coming to an end, but other times it can be more premature than you might think. Helps you in the long run to have given it a bit of thought. And I think also in the short term, whilst you're an athlete, it takes that pressure off. You're like, oh, this isn't the only thing that I can bring value to, I guess. So yeah, this isn't my only skill set. There's other things that I'll be able to contribute to in like a helpful and like fulfilling, productive way. It's about starting to explore what those could be. So yes, an answer. No, not a distraction. Helpful, the opposite.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we often talk about, throughout most of this series, I'll hear people talking about the idea of just being all in. So if you want to be the best at whatever your sport is, you kind of got to be all in. And all in means, sacrificing probably certain elements of friendships, certain elements of diet, certain elements of holidays, etc., etc. And obviously careers and education often fall into that mix as well. So I guess is, when you talk about exploring, it's kind of how much can you do of exploring before the exploring is actually considered a distraction to the overall goal, which is whatever it is, qualify for the Olympics, win the titles, win the Olympics, whatever it is. So it'd be interesting to know, and maybe it's not one for now, but it's what is that line to say, yeah, we're happy to explore careers up until this line, but beyond it is actually becoming a distraction that would affect performance. So on the one hand, you're talking about the kind of mental well-being, the kind of confidence, the identity that will grow out of exploring. Cool. I didn't realize actually I'm a rower, but actually I'm showing a lot of skill sets that would prove to be very useful in accountancy. And maybe I'll do 1 week's work experience or whatever, just an example. But immediately it starts creating belief and confidence that, that there is something there to go after. And it's just how much does the exploring line, how far does the exploring line go before somebody or a coach or somebody would say, maybe even yourself would say, okay, now it's starting to actually take away from my core, which is winning medals.
Exactly. And you're completely right. And I think that like that almost question probably starts coming in, maybe for myself, at least a bit earlier than perhaps in hindsight was accurate. So it's like, yeah, how much is this actually having a detrimental impact? But you're completely right. There's a balance. Like if you're to suddenly be spending all your time thinking about careers rather than doing like what's required, then that would be detrimental. But that's probably answering like some sort of question that maybe the priorities where you are starting to shift. I think it's probably quite difficult to be like an elite athlete without being pretty all in to the sport. It's about like, you also get a lot of downtime. Like when you're a full-time athlete, you get like a fair amount of downtime. And that was probably one of the things that I noticed when I stopped rowing. I was like, oh, blimey. Like my day is full and it's full of like work. So where do I fit like just me time? Like that became more of a struggle. Like you had your weekends, which you didn't necessarily have before, and you're not like very, very tired, but like fitting like other things in, I realized how much time I did have when I was an athlete in terms of like recovery between sessions, time that you half on Wednesday, like, that I could have probably used like slightly more productively. You also have to have like relaxing time whilst you're rowing. But yeah, there is time to do some exploring without it impacting the rowing or whatever the sport is. Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. Well, that's probably all we've got time for, I think, today, Alice. But yeah, really, really appreciate all of your insights and experiences from your time at University of Bristol and in the GB rowing setup. And yeah, hopefully our listeners will take some value from it and help guide their journey a little bit as well. So yes, really, really appreciate your time. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed speaking. Thanks, Mark.